tossing and turning. What's wrong? Are you still stressed out about that thing you told me about earlier? Well, I don't think you need me to tell you that. Losing sleep over it is gonna help you, but... Do you want me to close the window? The sound of the rain helps me sleep. I always need some kind of white noise to help me stay asleep. You would think that silence would be optimal, but nah. Well, do you think there's anything I can do to help you fall back asleep? No. Well, you always do say I have a relaxing voice, so why don't I, try reading you a bedtime story? Yeah, I'm serious. I mean, you never know. Oh, come on. Here, let me go get one of my favorite books. Okay? Here. Ah, this will definitely do it. Grimm's Fairy Tales. Now, I haven't read every single story in it, but I do like what I have read. So, okay, how about The Raven? No. Well, then... Here's one. The Mouse, the Bird, and the Sausage. Yeah? You dork. Alright. Once upon a time, a mouse, a bird, and a sausage entered into partnership and set up house together. For a long time, all went well. They lived in great comfort and prospered so far as to be able to add considerably to their stores. The bird's duty was to fly daily into the woods and bring in fuel. The mouse fetched the water, and the sausage saw to the cooking. When people are too well off, they always begin to long for something new. And so it came to pass that the bird, while out one day, met a fellow bird to whom he boastfully expatiated on the excellence of his household arrangements. But the other bird sneered at him for being a poor simpleton, who did all the hard work, while the other two stayed at home and had a good time for it. For when the mouse had made the fire and fetched the water, she could retire into her little room and rest until it was time to set the table. The sausage had only to watch the pot to see that the food was properly cooked, and when it was near dinner time, he just threw himself into the broth or rolled in and out among the vegetables 3 or 4 times, and there they were, buttered and salted and ready to be served. Then, when the bird came home and had laid aside his burden, they sat down to table, and when they had finished their meal, they could sleep their fill to the following morning, and that it was really a very delightful life. Influenced by those remarks, the bird next morning refused to bring the wood, telling the others that he had been their servant long enough, and had been a fool into the bargain, and that it was now time to make a change, and to try some other way of arranging the work. Beg and pray as the mouse and sausage might, it was of no use. The bird remained master of the situation, and the venture had to be made. They therefore drew lots, and it fell to the sausage to bring the wood, to the mouse to cook, and to the bird to fetch the water. And now what happened? The sausage started in search of wood, the bird made the fire, and the mouse put on the pot. And then these two waited till the sausage returned with the fuel for the following day. But the sausage remained so long away that they became uneasy, and the bird flew out to meet him. Had he not flown far, however, when he came across a dog, who, having met the sausage, had regarded him as legitimate booty, and so seized and swallowed him. The bird complained to the dog of this barefaced robbery, but nothing he said was of any avail, for the dog answered that he found false credentials on the sausage, and that was the reason his life had been forfeited. He picked up the wood and flew sadly home, and told the mouse all he had seen and heard. They were both very unhappy, but agreed to make the best of things to remain with one another. So now the bird set the table and the mouse looked after the food, and wishing to prepare it in the same way as the sausage, by rolling in and out among the vegetables to salt and butter them, she jumped into the pot, but she stopped short long before she reached the bottom, having already parted with not only her skin and hair, but also with life. Presently the bird came in and wanted to serve up dinner, but he could no longer see the cook. In his alarm and flurry, he threw the wood here and there and about the floor, called and searched, but the cook was nowhere to be found. Then some of the wood that had been carelessly thrown down caught fire and began to blaze. The bird hastened to fetch some water, but his pail fell into the wall and he after it, and as he was unable to recover himself, he was drowned. Well then, I think the moral of the story is abundantly clear. Basically, don't force others to do a job that you can do when you don't know if they can do it. Although, what the hell is with the anthropomorphic sausage? That's funny. I get the mouse and the bird, but not the sausage. Your job is to roll into the stew. Although, I guess if you have an immortal sausage and you let it go fetch wood, you're kind of just asking for a dog to eat it, right? What? Oh, the grammar is weird. Yeah, this was, let me look. Published in 1876, so it is very, very dated English. Yeah. All right, you want another one? How about this one? The straw, the coal, and the bean. The common theme seems to be 3 things in the story. There's definitely more, but these are the shorter ones, and I'm not sure if you're actually enjoying this, are you? Oh, you look awfully proud of yourself. All right. In a village dwelt a poor woman who had gathered together a dish of beans and wanted to cook them. So she made a fire on her hearth, and that it might burn the quicker, she lighted it with a handful of straw. When she was emptying the beans into the pan, one dropped without her observing it, and lay on the ground beside the straw. And soon afterwards a burning coal from the fire leapt down to the 2. Then the straw began and said, "Dear friends, from whence do you come here?" The coal replied, "I fortunately sprang out of the fire, and if I had not escaped by sheer force, my death would have been certain. I should have been burnt to ashes." The bean says, "I too have escaped with my whole skin, but if the old woman had got me into the pan, I would have been made into broth without any mercy, like my comrades." "And would a better fate have fallen to my lot?" said the straw. "The old woman has destroyed all of my brethren in fire and smoke. She seized 60 of them at once, took their lives. I luckily slipped through her fingers." "But what are we to do now?" said the coal. "I think," answered the bean, "that as we have so fortunately escaped death, we should keep together like good companions, and lest a new mischance should overtake us here, we should go away together and repair to a foreign country." The proposition pleased the 2 others, and they set out on their way together. Soon, however, they came to a little brook, and as there was no bridge or foot-plank, they did not know how they were to get over it. The straw hit on a good idea and said, "I will lay myself straight across, and you can walk over me as on a bridge." And the straw therefore stretched itself from one bank to the other, and the coal, who was of an impetuous disposition, tripped quite boldly on the newly built bridge, but when she had reached the middle, and had heard the water rushing beneath her, she was after all afraid, and stood still, and ventured no farther. The straw, however, began to burn, broke into 2 pieces, and fell into the stream. The coal slipped after her, hissed when she got into the water, and breathed her last. The bean, who had prudently stayed behind on the shore, could not but laugh at the events, was unable to stop, and laughed so heartily that she burst. It would have been all over with her likewise, if by good fortune a tailor who was travelling in search of work had not sat down to rest by the brook. As he had a compassionate heart, he pulled out his needle and thread, and sewed her together. The bean thanked him most prettily, but as the tailor used black thread, all beans since then have had a black seam. That one was rather odd. If I had to think of a moral for it, don't be so foolhardy and think before you act, but the bean bursting its seams laughing doesn't really make sense to me. What do you think it means? Basically, don't trust other people. All right. I think I have one more in me before I have to get back to bed. I have all those papers to do in the morning, you know. uh, let's see. Okay, this one's only a page long. It's called The Fox and the Cat. It happened that the cat met the fox in the forest, and as she thought to herself, he is clever and full of experience, and much esteemed in the world. She spoke to him in a friendly way. "Good day, dear Mr. Fox. How are you? How is all with you? How are you getting on in these hard times?" The fox, full of all kinds of arrogance, looked at the cat from head to foot, and for a long time did not know whether or not he could give any answer or not. At last he said, "Oh, you wretched beard cleaner, you piebald fool, you hungry mouse hunter. What can you be thinking of? Have you the cheek to ask how I am getting on? What have you learnt? How many arts do you understand?" "I understand but one," replied the cat modestly. "What art is that?" asked the fox. "When the hounds are following me, I can spring into a tree to save myself." "Is that all?" said the fox. "I am master of 100 arts, and have into the bargain a sack full of cunning. You make me sorry for you. Come with me. I will teach you how people get away from the hounds." Just then came a hunter with 4 dogs. The cat sprang nimbly up into a tree and sat atop of it, where the branches and foliage quite concealed her. "Open your sack, Mr. Fox, open your sack," cried the cat to him, but the dogs had already seized him, and were holding him fast. "Ah, Mr. Fox," cried the cat, "you with your 100 arts are left in the lurch. Had you been able to climb like me, you would have not lost your life." Yes. Oh my god. Okay. One more. Let us go through a couple of pages. How about... Okay, this one is called The Golden Goose. It's decently long, and it is the last one. And you cannot convince me to read any more with those big puppy eyes of yours. No. Alright. There was a man who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Dummling, and was despised, mocked, and sneered at on every occasion. It happened that the eldest wanted to go into the forest to hew wood, and before he went, his mother gave him a beautiful sweet cake and a bottle of wine in order that he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. When he entered the forest, he met a little gray-haired old man, who bade him good day, and said, "Do give me a piece of cake out of your pocket, and let me have a draught of your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But the clever son answered, "If I give you any of my cake and wine, I shall have none for myself. Be off with you." And he left the little man standing and went on. But when he began to hew down the tree, it was not long before he made a false stroke, and the axe cut him in the arm. So he had to go home and have it bound up. And this was the little gray man's doing. After the second son went into the forest, and his mother gave him, like the eldest, a cake and a bottle of wine, the little gray man met him likewise and asked him for a piece of cake and a drink of wine. But the second son, too, said sensibly enough, "What I give you will be taken away from myself. Be off." And he left the little man standing and went on. His punishment, however, was not delayed. When he had made a few blows at the tree, he struck himself in the leg, and so he had to be carried home. Then Dummling said, "Father, do let me go and cut wood." The father answers, "Your brothers have hurt themselves with it. Leave it alone. You do not understand anything about it." But Dummling begged so long that at last he said, "Just go then. You will get wiser by hurting yourself." His mother gave him a cake made with water and baked in the cinders, and with it a bottle of sour beer. When he came to the forest, the little gray man met with him likewise, and greeting him said, "Give me a piece of your cake and a drink of your bottle. I am so hungry and thirsty." Dummling answered, "I have only cinder cake and sour beer. If that pleases you, we will sit down and eat." So they sat down, and when Dummling pulled out his cinder cake, it was a fine sweet cake, and the sour beer had become good wine. So they ate and drank, and after that little man said, "Since you have a good heart, and you are willing to divide what you have, I will give you good luck. There stands an old tree. Cut it down, and you will find something at the roots." Then the little man took leave of him. Dummling went and cut down the tree, and when it fell, there was a goose sitting at the roots with feathers of pure gold. He lifted her up, and taking her with him, he went to an inn where he thought he would stay the night. Now the host had 3 daughters, who saw the goose and were curious to know how such a wonderful bird might be, and would like to have one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought, "I shall soon find an opportunity of pulling out a feather." And as soon as Dummling had gone out, she seized the goose by the wing, but her finger and hand remained sticking fast to it. The second came soon afterwards, thinking only of how she might get a feather for herself. But she had scarcely touched her sister than she was held fast. At last the third also came with the intent, and the other screamed out, "Keep away! For goodness sake, keep away!" But she did not understand why she was to keep away. The others are here, she thought. I may as well be here too, and ran to them. But as soon as she had touched her sister, she remained sticking fast to her. So they had to spend the night with the goose. The next morning, Dumpling took the goose under his arm and set out, without troubling himself about the three girls who were hanging on to it. They were obliged to run after him continually, now left, now right, wherever his legs took him. In the middle of the fields the parson met them. And when he saw the procession, he said, "For shame, you good-for-nothing girls, why are you running across the fields after this young man? Is that seemly?" At the same time he seized the youngest by the hand, in order to pull her away, but as soon as he touched her, he likewise stuck fast, and was himself obligated to run behind. Before long the sexton came by, and saw his master, the parson, running behind three girls. He was astonished at this, and called out, "Hi, your reverence, whither away so quickly? Do not forget that we have a christening today." And running after him, he took him by the sleeve, but was also stuck fast to it. Whilst the five were trotting thus one behind the other, two labourers came with their hoes from the fields. The parson called out to them and begged that they would set him and the sexton free. But they had scarcely touched the sexton when they were held fast, and now there were 7 of them running behind Dumpling and the goose. Soon afterwards he came to a city, where a king ruled who had a daughter who was so serious that no one could make her laugh. So he had put forth a decree that whoever would be able to make her laugh should marry her. When Dumpling heard this, he went with his goose and all her train before the king's daughter, and as soon as she saw the 7 people running on, one behind the other, she began to laugh quite loudly, and as if she would never stop. Thereupon Dumpling asked to have her for his wife, but the king did not like the son-in-law, and made all manner of excuses, and said that he must first produce a man who could drink a cellar full of wine. Dumpling thought of the little grey man, who could certainly help him, so he went to the forest, and in the same place where he had felled the tree, he saw a man sitting, who had a very sorrowful face. Dumpling asked him what he was taking to heart so sorely, and he answered, "I have such a great thirst, and cannot quench it. Cold water I cannot stand, a barrel of wine I have just emptied, but that is to me like a drop on a hot stone." "There I can help you," said Dumpling. "Just come with me, and you shall be satisfied." He led him into the king's cellar, and the man bent over the huge barrels and drank till his loins hurt. And before the day was out, he had emptied all of the barrels. Then Dumpling asked once more for his bride, but the king was vexed that such an ugly fellow, whom everyone called Dumpling, should take away his daughter, and he made a new condition. He must first find a man who could eat a whole mountain of bread. Dumpling did not think long, but he went straight into the forest, where in the same place there sat a man who was tying up his body with a strap, and making an awful face, and saying, "I have eaten a whole oven full of rolls, but what good is that when one has such hunger as I? My stomach remains empty, and I must tie myself up if I am not to die of hunger." At this Dumpling was glad, and said, "Get up and come with me, and you shall eat yourself full." He led him to the king's palace, where all the flour in the whole kingdom was collected, and from it he caused a huge mountain of bread to be baked. The man from the forest stood before it, and began to eat, and by the end of one day the mountain had vanished. Then Dumpling for the 3rd time asked for his bride, but the king again sought a way out, and ordered a ship which he could sail on land and on water, as soon as you come sailing back in it, and he said, "You shall have my daughter for your wife." Dumpling went straight to the forest, and there sat the little grey man, to whom he had given his cake. When he heard what Dumpling wanted, he said, "Since you have given me to eat and drink, I will give you the ship, and I do this all because you were once kind to me." Then he gave him the ship which could sail on land and water, and when the king saw that, he could no longer prevent him from having his daughter. The wedding was celebrated, and after the king's death, Dumpling inherited his kingdom, and lived for a long time contentedly with his wife. That was 4 stories, and I sure hope you enjoy. Dear? Aww. Well, I was right. I knew it would help. Good night, darling.